Hi everyone, my name is Markiant here, and let me introduce myself. And I'm a PhD in linguistics. I also have a TESOL diploma. This is a teacher. I'm a teacher of English to speakers of other languages. Also, I have my own school. I'm a founder and director of A to Z English School. From time to time, I work for the OSCE as an interpreter. This is the organization of security and cooperation in Europe. And I'm also an associate professor in King Danilo University. Maybe you know such a resource, such a site as Bookie. I am taking one of the first places on this site. It's because of my YouTube blog. I'm also a YouTube blogger. Like on my channel, I portray myself. I'm playing the role of an angry teacher. I'm making faces and I teach them in a maybe in a funny manner. It's like education and entertainment. Here you can look at my contacts. You can look at my YouTube channel. Also, you can subscribe to my Facebook group. This is an A to Z English King Danilo University, where you can find where you can find the different resources. I post them every day, and my personal page is Markiant here. You can find me on Facebook. Also, you can write to me an email, and you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. And so, as you know, the topic of our webinar today is how to teach English vocabulary and speaking. And a few words about the content of our meeting is that we'll talk today about speaking and vocabulary resources, mainly learning images, because as you know, maybe someone visited my previous webinars, that I'm a fan of learning images more than textbooks. Also, I will recommend you some sites for speaking. Then we'll talk about modern materials in the learning process. Some modern approaches in speaking and learning vocabulary. I will get you acquainted with such an approach as speed English and ESL discussions in English. Also, I'll get you familiarized with idioms in questions and some techniques to start a conversation. And of course, I'll share with you how to teach students to apply all these techniques. Yes, I'm from Ivano-Frankivsk, and nice to meet you all. From the very beginning, I would like to start by saying that there is such a problem in Ukrainian schools that school teachers don't pay a lot of attention to speaking, and my students come and complain about some of the teachers, and it's a great problem because the students can't speak, and they can find they have a very poor speaking skills, and that's why I selected this topic for this webinar, and I think that it will be really useful for all of you. Yeah, so most effective online resources for you guys I think that it's American English at State. This is just like learning images that I'm using for speaking and vocabulary. Also, I like to use presentations on Speed English. We'll talk about it a little bit later. And here you can see the site when you can use plenty of different topics. It depends on the field of your students, on his or her interests, and you can choose any topic you want for the discussion. And so I would like to start from the vocabulary and how to teach vocabulary and mix vocabulary with speaking. As I've already mentioned, that I'm a fan of this American edition, American English at State. Why? Because it was designed by native speakers, and it has colorful paintings and colorful images, and you can learn a lot from them. So how do I do it? How do I teach my students? So first I ask them to read the definition of this or that term, for example, direct, to guide or set the course for people or things. Then they read the example. And after that, I try to use this word and even collocation in speech. So, for example, if this is an adult, I'll ask him, have you ever directed any employees, or have you ever, and how many employees did you direct in your life? If it's a student just from school, you can ask him or her, do you want to be a director, and how many employees do you want to direct in the future? So the same thing is with attain. You can ask them a question. So how many? You can ask them the question, what degree did you attain, and where did you attain this degree, and what, for example, like attain has two meanings. You see that to achieve a goal and to succeed in receiving or getting something. So you can even ask them two questions. Like what goals would you like to attain in your life? And the discussion will be pretty interesting, and you will break the ice. We are talking in terms of job interviews and resumes. You know, the guys, that I don't know about you, but now I have a lot of students whom I prepare for job interviews, and they are looking for a job. They are looking for a job in different spheres. So it's this content is rather useful to my mind. The same thing you can do with evaluate. You can ask, how do you evaluate the situation in Ukraine, the political situation in Ukraine? How do you evaluate the education system in Ukraine? And you can discuss all the things after vocabulary and speaking. Also, accomplish. You know that the most spread question on the job interview is what is your biggest accomplishment, and what goal did you accomplish? That they can share all these thoughts with you. Also, you can talk about assist. Yeah, do you like to assist people with something, and read the definition and this like arrange some debates. After that, you take some reviews. You review all the vocabulary, and you pay attention to some collocations, and try to discuss not just vocabulary, but collocations. That is the combination of words. So, for example, if it's a statement, try to lead my team to success, you can say that lead somebody to success, yes, or manage a team of XYZ employees, or initiate the business, or moderate meetings, encourage encourage employee retention, or coordinate schedules. So in this case, as a result, your students will look much more natural speaking English, and will have a good command of it. Also, like, establish the library, accomplish a goal. So you can even write out these collocations on Google Docs, or on the chat if you are teaching online, or like in their exercise books if it's offline, if it's an offline class. Direct a staff of XYZ employees, yes, to guide a company to handle communication. Edit work, create a design, assist somebody with something, to do some consulting, identify the problem. And after the review, you can give them like homework, to think over some vocabulary, and to fill the gaps, to use this vocabulary in these sentences. After that, no, for example, sometimes it's difficult to coordinate schedules. So you take this word, they can use this vocabulary, and they will memorize it much better. You see that here are like a lot of words, and they can fill the gaps here. So when students succeed, teachers accomplish their goal. Or one more review is how do you assist others when they need help. So you can see that they can cement this vocabulary in an easy way. Also, you can give them some other tasks. Here you have very good resources. You can take away the word, for example, a handle, and they, in front of them, they can have only the definition of it, and judging by the definition, they can come up with the word. For example, here is the word handle, and they can put this handle even like in the sentence, using the appropriate tense. For example, our secretary handles communications for the office, and in such a way they can even practice grammar. Or the computer programmer was about to identify the problem with the software, so they will refresh all this vocabulary in their memory. The same task is here. This is the word accomplish. I accomplished my goal of being the #1 salesperson on our team. The physical therapist assisted me with my ankle problem until I was better. I do some consulting. I create design for the company's new office building. So as you see that there are many tasks for revision, for reviewing, and there are also some tasks for teachers, for you not to think about the correct what it should be like in the gaps, so you can just check your understanding, test your understanding, and teach them without any problems. Also, if we started talking about work, you can give them some additional materials about work. You can ask them what do you do, and give them some formulas. For example, I am a teacher. Yes, I am a doctor. I am plus occupation. So what do you do? What's your job? I'm a student. They can talk about themselves. So where do you study or where do you work? I work at at a school, or I work at a hospital. So it depends. It depends on the level. It depends on the field, on the specialty of a person. It depends on many circumstances. And where do you work for? For example, I work for the government, or I work for the mayor. I work for some other company, for Google. Yes, I work at a school. It depends. If you are a student in this school, so you don't need to go to school. So, for example, I'm a student. I'm a pupil, and I go to school. But if you are an employee at this school, so you use an article. This is the answer to your question, Olesya. And small talks, you can also use a small talk. This is a very cool approach. You can use these small, like these images before your class to break the ice. So, for example, how is your day going? You can teach them how to behave at work and how to deal with their future or current co-workers or colleagues. And the conversation is usually great because here are the questions and there must be some answers. So you can ask them, how is your day going, and how was your weekend? They can share some experience, and they will already know how to what to ask their colleagues, their co-workers. You can practice different tenses, so you can here you can see the present perfect. Also, you can use the past simple if you talk about your weekend. Also, the present continuous in the future. If it's intention, are you going to the office party? And also even present simple if you talk about the plans for the weekend. You can also ask them to read and discuss cultural tips. Maybe in the United States, it's not appropriate to gossip about other co-workers, but you can ask, what do you think about that? do you think that gossiping is inappropriate? Maybe you have another point of view concerning this issue, this statement, yes? Or you can ask them, what do you think personal topics or questions are? Do we have to ask can we speak on all the topics like at work? Do we have to speak on politics? And do we have to speak on personal matters? And where is the margin? So you can ask, you can even make debates on US cultural tips. And is it okay to share your salaries? And if you have a big class, you can just make a discussion, and you can divide your class in two parts, and one part will be against talking about salaries, and the other part will be for providing salaries and for sharing salaries among co-workers. And in this case, they can negotiate, they can argue, and so on and so forth. The same series of images about small talks is about common interests. Really, it's a great finding a common interest can start a great conversation, especially when you talk about sports, when you discuss music or some movies that you have watched lately, or like different hobbies. What do you like to do for fun? So they are always eager to answer these questions, and consequently the conversation is great. Also, you can practice them the past simple by asking different questions, like did you plus verb plus object. Did you watch the news last night? They can practice discussing what they watched last night by using the past simple. Or did you see the parade yesterday? So and you can write out the word parade and explain to them what a parade is, or catch the game, the collocation, and in this way you can combine vocabulary and speaking. Or did you hear about the election? And you can give them some election vocabulary. Sometimes it's really boring to speak on the weather, but fortunately we have good materials even on such not an interesting topic like the weather. We can make a good discussion because we can complement different extra materials here. You can ask them, is it a beautiful day? Will it be a sunny all day? Like you can ask them what they predict. And of course, you can give them some extra materials how to answer these questions and what collocations or what sentences to use when we describe the weather. For some upper intermediate and advanced learners, you can also use you can also give some idioms related to the weather. You can ask them to read these idioms to give them the definition. and provide them with some examples. After that, you can ask some questions. For example, what are the best ways to break the ice? And they can give you their tips. You can share some tips with them, and they can give you some tips how to break the ice, how to start a conversation. With the brainstorm, you can ask them, for example, how often do you do brainstorming? How often do you brainstorm? They can share some experience with you, or with the rain on somebody's parade. Have you ever been in such a situation when somebody rained on your parade? Yes, and how was it? And the last idiom, you can just ask them, looking at this example about the Beatles. So the Beatles took the world by storm in the 1960s, and you can ask, for example, what music band took the world by storm in the 21st century? To your mind, and they can give you like a bunch of different responses. So also you can give them some vocabulary related to nature and natural resources. You see that here is a waterfall, the definition of the waterfall, the example of this word in the context, and you can ask them, for example, have you seen waterfalls in your life? Were you in the Carpathian Mountains, maybe in some other mountains, in the Alps or so? And have you ever seen the waterfalls? Or you can ask about geysers. So which what country is famous for its geysers? You can also ask about glaciers. What do you think of global warming? And also like about icebergs and glaciers and the greenhouse effect, and so on and so forth. The conversation is being built. To cement all this vocabulary in their memory, you can give them some materials of reviewing, like vocabulary review. So here they can look at all this vocabulary one more time, and to make up some sentences, for example, with mountain, island, glacier, waterfall, geyser, peninsula. Just looking at the examples. So let's move on to one more interesting approach that I've been using for ages, and it's called Speed English. Maybe you've heard of Speed English before. If you heard it before, you can just write a plus. Okay, it was derived, in my opinion, from date English, from like speed dates, yes. When a boy and a girl went on a speed date, and they talked with each other, and then they changed their partners. And in class, in the English class, you can also use this approach. You can speak on different topics. with your partners, like in class. And usually rules on speed English are as follows. If you have a big class, and if you want everybody to participate in the discussion, you need to follow these rules. You have 2 minutes per conversation. There are 2 rows of participants. Yes, the first row is movable and the other is static. So basically, people from the first row have to move one place to the left. And there is a static row of people that doesn't move. And you can be a moderator of it, and you can give them a signal. And if like the conversation is done, so for example for 2 or 3 minutes, if the conversation is over, you can give them a signal, and those in the movable row step left and are facing a new partner. I like to collect different interesting questions for the conversation. And I made like 2 presentations with different questions. Maybe they contain like 500 questions, and you can apply all these presentations in your class, and it will be awesome. So, for example, students can ask each other this question: if you inherited or won $1 million, so what would you do with it? And they would discuss it for 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, and 1 minute, like preferably 1 minute for one partner, and the other minute for the other partner, and they can communicate with each other. Though you have to somehow to moderate this because it can be pretty noisy in your classroom, and you can also answer some questions. If they ask you this or that word, you can help them, you can assist them with doing that, and you are in the role of a facilitator. Or you can ask, you can give them another question. What are your life and career goals in 5 or 10 or 15 years? And they can dream about their life in 5 or 10 or 15 years. They can share their opinions. And one more: if you could choose one superpower, what would it be and why? So usually the students share their opinions about the fact that they want to read their minds, they want to have a superpower to fly, and at the end of Speed English, you can ask them what was the best answer, what was the funniest answer, what was the most awkward answer from your partner. You can have a lot of fun after that, and they can share some thoughts, like opinions that they have heard from their partners. And usually both students and teachers have fun doing that. There are some other questions. For example, the question 5: Are you superstitious? If so, what are you most superstitious about? You can also build a discussion on superstitions, divide your class in two parts, who are for superstitions and who are against superstitions, and so on and so forth. Maybe you have some questions for me, and you can ask them in the chat, and I will be pleased to answer all of your questions now. It doesn't matter for me. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll continue. So we are gradually moving on to different sorts of discussions, and if a student is specialized or wants to be specialized in particular topics, you can visit such an interesting site as www.esldiscussions.com. On this site, you'll have a plethora of discussions on different topics. So, for example, if your student wants to be an expert in IT, a future IT specialist, or if your student is an IT worker, I think that it would be great if you took the discussion about software, about robotry, and about the computers, different tablets, or maybe even Facebook or YouTube, and there are various discussions on different topics on this platform, on this site. How can we use Speed English for individual classes? If we have individual classes, Oля, you can speak with your students like in person for 2 or 3 minutes. You can be his or her partner, and if you have good imagination, you can become a good interlocutor with your student. How to break a psychological barrier and make students speak? This is a good question, and after passing this TESOL diploma, the easiest way to break a psychological barrier and make students speak is to let them work in pairs. Like I recommended you to use the Speed English approach. They will talk to each other, and after that, of course, it's very difficult for them to break all these barriers and to speak in public. Yes, and first they speak with their own peers, like classmates. And after that, gradually, they will adjust to that atmosphere and they will speak in public. Could you please write down the name or the link to the site you are talking about? I will give you that presentation. Here is the link to this site. You see www.esldiscussions.com, like on this presentation, and you can use it. Do you know any good techniques to remember all those words you've shown us at the beginning? Actually, you can use my techniques, but if you don't, but if it's not enough for you, you can use the technique room. I've got to know about this technique lately, and you can make your students imagine the room and, for example, like the corridor in school, in their own school, yes, and to imagine that near the door there is a waterfall, yes, and you set some anchors, like the door and the waterfall. Then, near the second door there is a statue, and near the statue there is a geyser, and they remember the statue. They will remember this geyser. They will remember this waterfalls, and after that, if they want to refresh their vocabulary in their memory, it will be a no-brainer for them to imagine this room and the sequence of objects in that room. So this is one of the techniques to remember, to memorize words. There are different techniques. Of course, this is visualization, association, but the point is in all these sequence. There must be a sequence, some associations, you know. Do you introduce the grammar structures before using speed English approach? What grammar structures do you mean? How will they remember the spelling of words? Okay, spelling of words. Again, some associations. Maybe they know the word from their language. Maybe they know, let's take the word waterfall. Water and fall, yes? Imagine that here is the water is falling down. And they know two words, and now they can come up with the waterfall, yeah? Also geyser. We have the word geyser in our language, and hazer, geyser, and it's not a big deal for them to memorize it. It's all about you, and sometimes the associations can be really weird. Yeah, okay, but still you can use even the weirdest associations with them. Or if it's difficult for them to come up with the associations, you can give your own examples. Okay, Vera, for example, the if clause. They can look at the structure. If it's second conditionals, like in question, we had the question 4, yes? We had, yes, I write, if it's the upper intermediate class, I don't think that they should ask this question, but if these are like pre-intermediates, you can write down the structure on the board. It depends on the level of the students, of your students. And it depends on the materials which you took, which you already taken. Okay, so I really enjoy working and using this site, and it has even like one topic has 20 questions, one half, like the one part of this discussion, for example, about software, you can discuss in class, and the other part you can give them to for writing and to answer the questions in writing, in a written form. You can also, for some advanced students, you can use business English idioms, and you can explain to them these idioms. For example, I made up a presentation on business English idioms based on this discussion, and I added some like funny pictures from the internet to this discussion for better memorization and visualization. And I usually use this presentation for different, even when I work with IT companies, with different other companies, and on my business trainings, and those who want to learn corporate business English. So, for example, the question, does it take you a long time to figure out something? Can you do it in your head, or do you need a calculator? So do it in one's head. You can ask them to answer this question, but only one condition, that he has to use this collocation, this phrase, in his answer. And in such a way, students memorize all of these business idioms and collocations. One more question. What do you think of the credit squeeze? Are you borrowing less, spending less on your credit card because of that? And there are some funny pictures for some corporate workers. So this specific this presentation would be useful for some employees, for corporate workers, and if they are interested in business English. You see like one more funny picture about the bottom line. And why do business people focus on the bottom line so much? You can you can explain to them that the bottom line is like the main core of something, but in business English it can be the results. So you can explain that business English vocabulary is a little bit different than from like everyday vocabulary, and you can it depends on the context. So my favorite one is the question about breaking even, or being the red or being the black. So you can ask them this question, and you can practice this vocabulary. Do you break even at the end of the month, or are you in the red or even in the black? You can ask them about their companies, and so on and so forth. Okay, one more good technique is some ways to start a conversation. You can tell them about some tips how to start a conversation, because for some students it could be a real challenge to break the ice. This is just the answer to your question about psychological barrier, Svetlana, and here are some good techniques. So 4 techniques is just like making a statement. For example, that was an interesting talk about managing change. So you give a sort of a hint for your interlocutor, or there was or to your peer, your classmate, and your classmate might react to your remark. Also, a good way to start a conversation is to use a tag question. For example, Mr. Smith is a brilliant speaker, isn't he? Of course, this tag question requires not just like he is, yes, like yes he is, but also requires a long answer, like not a short answer. And you can say that it's not preferable to ask general questions when you want to start a good conversation. You need to ask an open questions or special questions, and you can write, for example, some question words, WH questions. So, for example, what, where, when, why, who, and whose, how often, and so on and so forth. Not to start the question with do or does, because do or does require the answer just yes I do or no I don't. So you'd better ask questions like use WH questions. And also it's a nice tip, it's a good tip to use greetings in the conversation, in breaking the ice. So for example, I don't think we've met. I am Mark, and nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Also, I give them like different variants of greetings. Like for example, like from I can't complain, how are you doing? I can't complain, or being better, or for example pretty good. And I ask them to be like friendly when they communicate, and use as like use like don't use short sentences yes and no, just to come up with something else. How to use these techniques? You can use them in the following situations. So, for example, you can give them some situations. The first, like this one, the first speaker has just finished their presentation. The speech went on for 40 minutes, longer than expected. Say something to the person sitting next to you. So they have to elaborate, work on this situation, and make up some dialects using these 4 techniques. They can choose their technique, and to learn how to break all these barriers, psychological barriers, how to overcome their fear, and they will learn how to get acquainted with the new people and make friends with them. So here are some other situations where you can use this technique. So you know that all the situations are really natural, and they can be used like in everyday life. So for example, there is a coffee break between talks. You're waiting to get a drink, and their task is to start a conversation with the person standing next to you. And if they have, as soon as they have these templates of, you know, good, of these templates of techniques, it will be a no-brainer for them to start a conversation with a person nearby. This is all about, you know, the templates, some structures. It's not an easy thing, but if they have the structures in their mind, they will be braver. They will definitely overcome their fear one day if they need it. And one more situation, for example, you are in the self-service cafeteria at lunchtime, you think there is a free seat at one of the tables, and you have to ask the person sitting at the table if the seat is free and start the conversation. And the last situations, imagine that there is a party at the end of the conference. You see one of the speakers standing alone, introduce yourself and start a conversation. So you see that these situations are in everyday life. They can come up with everything. They can have fun, yes, because they can play, they can role play, they can act out, and they can have a whale of a time. And the last one is, for example, you are waiting to get your badge at the start of a conference. Think of something to say to the person waiting in front of the queue. You can, for example, like there is it is a long queue, isn't it? Or like, how long have you been waiting for getting the badge? Or let's say, I don't think we've ever met. I am Mark. So different techniques can be applied in this situations. Maybe you guys have some questions, so I'm looking forward to them. Yeah, so have you ever used these techniques with students, like Zarana wrote, and are you familiar with all of these techniques? You can write your comments below. While you are writing, I would like to give you a bonus. I arranged a folder, a special folder for you guys. It's just about job interview materials. So in this folder, the materials are not only about like job interviews, but also about the fact how to use this vocabulary in resumes, and a lot of materials about work and different role plays about work. So mainly the folder is about jobs, about work, about job interviews, and about resumes. All right. And maybe you have some questions for me. I'll remind you about my contacts. You can subscribe to my channel. You can follow my Facebook group, like A to Z English King Danilo University. Also, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write to me on like Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or email. And thanks a lot for your attention. You were really attentive, and I liked your questions. The questions were really interesting and exciting. Thanks a lot. And,
yeah, I'm here
again. Bye-bye.
So I see that somebody's typing.
Yeah, I'm here again. So I see that somebody's typing.
Yeah. Some feedback. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Some feedback.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, we will meet again tomorrow. I have already
if you
sent
don't
the
have any
invitation,
questions,
2 invitations actually for
we will meet
tomorrow's
again
two
tomorrow.
webinars.
I have
And
already sent
tomorrow
the
we will talk
invitation to
about
invitations actually for
effective lesson
tomorrow's
planning
two
and
webinars.
some
And tomorrow we will talk
if I'm not
about
mistaken,
effective lesson planning
yeah, and how to
some
teach reading and listening. So we will continue
moments.
tomorrow. Thank
Yeah,
you,
and
Mark,
how to
for
teach reading and
sharing your
listening.
experience.
So we
It
will
was very
continue
informative.
tomorrow. Thank you, Mark, for
Thank you guys for
sharing
your
your
feedback.
experience.
It's very
It's very
important,
informative.
really, that you write, that you
Thank you
liked
guys
it.
for your feedback. It's very
Okay.
important, really, that you write, that you liked it. Okay.
Yeah, so bye bye and see you tomorrow.
Yeah, so bye bye and see you tomorrow.
Bye bye.